My name is Claire Whitmore, and I was 46 years old the night my mother looked at me across my sister's wedding reception and called me the family burden in front of nearly 200 people. The words were quiet. That was what made them hurt. She didn't shout them. She didn't need to. My mother had always been talented at making cruelty sound like concern. I was standing near the entrance of the Willow Creek Estate Ballroom, holding a small envelope that contained the final vendor documents I had spent 6 months organizing for my sister's wedding, when she leaned toward my aunt and said, "Claire has always been the one we have to carry. Even today, she finds a way to make things difficult." I remember looking down at the envelope in my hand, the same envelope that contained the contracts, payment confirmations, and emergency contact list that had kept her daughter's dream wedding from falling apart. The same envelope nobody knew I had prepared. And the strangest part was this: I wasn't the person who caused the problem that night. I was the person who had quietly prevented one. But before I tell you what happened when the venue manager found me standing alone behind that welcome table, you need to understand how I became the person my family blamed for everything. Welcome to Calm Story House, where we share stories about quiet strength, hidden truths, and the moments when people finally learn their worth. If you have ever been misunderstood by the people who should have known you best, share your thoughts below and stay with this story. My sister Lauren was always the golden child. Not in the obvious way people imagine. She wasn't spoiled with expensive gifts or given everything she wanted. It was more complicated than that. Lauren was the daughter who knew how to make people feel needed. She laughed at my mother's jokes. She remembered birthdays. She called every Sunday. She had a way of making everyone believe they were the most important person in the room. I was different. I was the person who noticed when bills didn't add up. The person who read every contract before signing. The person who showed up early, stayed late, and quietly fixed problems nobody else wanted to acknowledge. I worked as an event coordinator for a small nonprofit organization in Pennsylvania, which meant I spent most of my professional life making impossible situations look effortless. Ironically, my family saw that same skill as proof that I was difficult. My mother, Diane, had a phrase she used whenever I questioned something. "Claire, you always think you know better." For years, I believed that was my flaw. I thought maybe I was too serious, too cautious, too focused on details. I thought if I relaxed more, smiled more, and needed less, my family would finally stop treating me like a responsibility. That belief followed me into adulthood. After my father passed away, I became the person everyone called when something needed to be handled. My mother needed help with paperwork. Lauren needed advice about her business. My nephew needed rides after school. Everyone had a reason why they needed me. But nobody seemed to have a reason to see me. And the wedding was supposed to be different. At least, I thought it was. Because 6 months before Lauren walked down the aisle, my mother called me and said the words that would eventually change everything. "Claire, your sister needs you." I should have known those words were never just a request. They were always an assignment. When my mother called me 6 months before Lauren's wedding, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. I remember that detail because it was something I did often. I would make coffee, start helping someone with something, and forget I had even poured it. "Claire, your sister needs you," my mother said. Not hello, not how are you, not how is work going. Just those 5 words, your sister needs you. I closed the folder I had been reviewing and looked out my apartment window at the quiet street below. "What happened?" "Nothing happened," Mom replied quickly. "Why do you always assume something is wrong?" Because after 46 years, I had learned that those words usually meant something was wrong. She explained that Lauren had booked Willow Creek Estate for her wedding reception. But the planning had become overwhelming. The venue had strict deadlines. The caterer needed final numbers. The florist needed confirmations. The photographer needed a timeline. The DJ needed access information. My sister had started a small online clothing boutique 2 years earlier, and while she was creative and wonderful with customers, organization was never her strength. That was where I came in. At least, that was what everyone believed. "Lauren just needs someone who understands these things," Mom said. "I coordinate events for work," I answered. "Exactly." The way she said it made me pause, not like she was complimenting me, like she had found a tool in a drawer. I still agreed. That was my weakness. I wanted to believe that if I kept proving my value, eventually people would stop questioning it. I had spent most of my life trying to earn a place in a family where I already belonged. I started helping Lauren the next week. At first, it was small things. I created a spreadsheet with vendor contacts. I organized invoices. I reviewed the venue contract. I noticed the floral company had charged a setup fee twice. I caught that the transportation company had the wrong ceremony time. I reminded Lauren about a required insurance certificate that the venue needed 30 days before the event. Every time I solved something, she smiled and said, "You're amazing, Claire." And for a little while, I believed she meant it. That was the dangerous part. Because Lauren wasn't cruel like my mother. She wasn't calculating. She was simply used to being protected. She had grown up in a family where someone always stepped in before consequences reached her. And for most of my life, that someone had been me. When we were children, Lauren was the dreamer. I was the responsible one. If she forgot her homework, I reminded her. If she lost her keys, I searched the house. If she argued with our parents, I became the person who explained her side. My mother used to say, "Claire, you're the mature one." I used to think that was a compliment. I didn't understand until much later that sometimes families praise you for carrying weight because they have no intention of ever helping you put it down. After Dad died, that role became even stronger. He had been the only person who noticed. My father was a quiet man. He repaired old furniture in his garage and kept every receipt in labeled envelopes. He once told me, "People think organization is about controlling things. It's not, it's about respecting what matters." I remembered those words often, especially when my family accused me of being difficult. The week before the wedding, everything started changing. Lauren became stressed. Mom became critical. And suddenly the same qualities they had depended on started becoming reasons to blame me. I questioned a last-minute change to the seating arrangement because it affected the caterer's timeline. Mom rolled her eyes. "Claire, this is why people get tired. You make everything complicated." I looked at her. "Making sure the vendors have the correct information isn't making things complicated." She sighed. "You always have an answer." That sentence stayed with me because I realized something. My family didn't actually dislike my answers. They disliked that my answers sometimes revealed problems they wanted to ignore. 2 days before the wedding, I found something that made my stomach drop. The final payment for the venue had not been processed, not delayed, not pending, not misplaced, never submitted. The remaining balance was $8,400, and the deadline was the next morning. I called Lauren immediately. She answered on the third ring. "Hey, what's up?" "Lauren, we need to talk about the venue payments." Silence. A long silence. Then she said softly, "What payment?" I closed my eyes, because in that moment I realized this wasn't just another mistake. This was something much bigger. And somehow I already knew who my family would blame. I drove to Lauren's house the next morning, because some conversations are too important to have over the phone. That was another habit I had learned from my father. Never solve a serious problem through a screen, he used to say. You lose too much when you can't see someone's face. At the time, I thought he was talking about business. Years later, I realized he was talking about family. Lauren opened the door wearing an oversized sweater, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked exhausted, not guilty, just overwhelmed. "Claire," she said quietly, "I was hoping you wouldn't find out like this." That sentence told me everything. I stepped inside. "What does that mean?" She walked toward the kitchen and sat at the island. "I thought I paid it." "You thought?" She rubbed her forehead. "I transferred money from the business account, but then there were other expenses. The dresses came in higher than expected. The invitations, the alterations, the extra guests. Lauren, the venue balance was due yesterday. I know." "No, I don't think you do." The words came out sharper than I intended. Lauren looked hurt, and immediately I felt that familiar guilt. That was my other weakness. Even when I was right, I hated seeing someone I loved feel bad. "I'm not trying to attack you," I said, "I know." But she didn't look like she knew. She looked like she was waiting for me to become the villain. That afternoon, I called Willow Creek Estate. The venue manager, Marcus Bell, answered. He was the type of person who sounded calm even when delivering bad news. "Willow Creek Events, Marcus speaking." "Hi, Marcus. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm helping coordinate Lauren Whitmore's wedding this weekend." There was a pause. "I know your name. That surprised me." "You do?" "Yes. You're the person who has been emailing us." I laughed slightly. "I suppose that's me." "No," he said. "I mean, you're the person who actually answers emails." I smiled despite myself. It was such a small comment. But after years of feeling invisible, being recognized for something I did felt strangely emotional. I explained the situation. Marcus checked his system. "I'm showing the balance as unpaid." "I know. We sent 3 reminders. To Lauren?" "Yes." I looked toward the kitchen window. The truth was becoming clearer. Was I copied on those emails? No, that made sense. Everyone contacted Lauren. Everyone trusted Lauren. Everyone assumed someone else would handle the details. Usually me. "Is there anything we can do?" I asked. Marcus was quiet. "The venue is booked. The staff is prepared. But legally, we need payment confirmation before tomorrow afternoon." "How much time do we have?" "Until 3 p.m., I thanked him and ended the call. Then I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes. Because I knew what needed to happen. I needed to fix it. Again. I transferred money from my savings account, $8,400. Money I had been saving for a new car. Money I had worked extra hours to build. Money nobody knew existed. I told myself it was temporary. Lauren would pay me back after the wedding. Family helped family. That was what I had always believed. The problem was, I had never asked whether my family believed the same thing. The wedding day arrived. Everything looked beautiful. The ballroom was covered in soft white flowers. The tables were arranged perfectly. The candles were placed exactly where Lauren wanted them. The music started on time. The guests smiled. Nobody knew how close everything had come to collapsing, and maybe that was the problem. Because when people only see this finished result, they rarely wonder who carried the weight to create it. During the cocktail hour, I stood near the entrance checking the final vendor list when I heard my mother's voice. She always does this. I turned. She was speaking to my Aunt Linda near the gift table. Does what? My aunt asked. Create stress, makes herself necessary, then expects everyone to be grateful. I froze. My aunt glanced at me. My mother didn't notice, or maybe she did. She's been a burden since she was young, Mom continued. Always needing special attention, always making things harder. My hand tightened around the envelope with every document, every payment record, every confirmation, the proof of what I had done. Then my mother looked directly at me, and she saw me standing there. For 1 second, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled sadly and said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear, Claire, don't start making a scene. This is Lauren's day. That was when I understood something. She wasn't afraid I would ruin the wedding. She was afraid someone would discover I had been the one holding it together. And before I could answer, someone behind me said, Excuse me, Claire Whitmore? I turned around. It was Marcus, the manager. And the look on his face told me he knew something I didn't. Claire Whitmore? I turned around and saw Marcus Bell standing beside the welcome table. He was holding a tablet in one hand and a small stack of papers in the other. For a moment, I wondered if something had gone wrong. That was my first instinct. After years of being the person blamed whenever something happened, I had trained myself to expect bad news. Yes? Marcus glanced toward my mother, then back at me. I've been looking for you. My mother smiled politely. Oh, Marcus, this is my daughter Claire. She helped a little with the wedding. A little. That phrase landed harder than I expected. 6 months of phone calls, hundreds of emails, hours spent reviewing contracts after work, $8,400 from my savings. A little. Marcus looked confused. Actually, I was hoping I could thank her. The air around us changed. My mother's smile disappeared for half a second. Thank her? Marcus nodded. Yes. The wedding would not have happened today without her. Nobody said anything. Not my mother, not my aunt, not the guests standing nearby pretending not to listen. Marcus opened the folder in his hand. Claire, I wanted to give you these copies. The updated payment confirmations, vendor adjustments, and the final coordination notes. He handed them to me. I looked down. There was my name, not Lauren's, mine. For some reason, seeing my name printed on official documents made my throat tighten. Because for so long, my work had existed in the background. Useful, necessary. Marcus continued. When we had the payment issue, Claire handled it professionally. She didn't panic. She didn't blame anyone. She worked with us, found a solution, and made sure every vendor had what they needed. My mother shifted uncomfortably. That was just family helping family. Marcus looked at her. I understand. His tone was respectful, but it wasn't agreeing. There's something else you should know. He looked at me. When the payment came through, the transaction notes included a personal account transfer. I wanted to confirm everything was correct because we don't usually see guests personally covering large balances. My stomach dropped. I had hoped nobody would mention that. Marcus. No, Claire, he said gently. You deserve credit for what you did. That sentence almost broke something inside me, not because it was dramatic, because it was simple. You deserve credit. How long had I waited to hear those words? My mother stepped closer. Claire, you didn't need to make this a public issue. I looked at her. I didn't make it public. She opened her mouth, then stopped, because she knew. I hadn't announced anything. I hadn't embarrassed anyone. I hadn't told people that the wedding almost disappeared because my sister forgot an important payment. I had protected Lauren, again. But now I was standing there while my mother protected a different story. The story where I was the problem. Marcus walked away after thanking me, but the damage was already done. Not damage to the wedding. Damage to the version of me my family had created. Later that evening, after the ceremony and before dinner, Lauren found me outside near the garden entrance. The lights from the reception reflected against the glass doors behind her. Why didn't you tell me Mom said those things? I looked at her. Because it wasn't my job to create another problem on your wedding day. She looked down. I heard her. That surprised me. What? I heard her call you a burden. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument. I'm sorry, Lauren whispered. I wanted those words to fix everything. I really did. That was the part of me I'm not proud of. The part that still wanted my family to suddenly understand. I wanted my sister to say I should have protected you. I wanted my mother to admit I was wrong. But Lauren only said, you know Mom doesn't mean things like that. And there it was. The sentence that explained everything. The excuse. The protection. The reason nothing ever changed. I looked at my sister. Lauren, people mean the things they repeat. She didn't answer. The music from inside grew louder. Everyone was celebrating. Everyone was happy. And I was standing outside realizing something painful. The money wasn't the biggest thing I had lost. The biggest loss was believing that if I helped enough, loved enough, and sacrificed enough, someone would finally choose me. That night, I went home with a copy of the wedding documents in my bag. But I also went home with something else. a question I had avoided for years. What happens when the person who always carries the family finally puts the weight down? For 3 days after Lauren's wedding, I did something I had never done before. Nothing. I didn't call my mother. I didn't check whether Lauren needed help returning decorations. I didn't ask if the wedding photos had arrived. I didn't send a message saying, "I hope you're doing okay." And the silence felt strange, not peaceful at first, strange. Because when you spend decades being responsible for everyone else's emotions, stepping back can feel almost selfish. I remember sitting on my apartment sofa on Sunday morning, staring at my phone. My mother's name was at the top of my recent calls. I could have reached out. Part of me wanted to. That was the hardest truth to admit. Even after everything she said, I still wanted my mother's approval. I still wanted her to call and say, "Claire, I was wrong," but she didn't. Instead, I received a message from Lauren. "Can we talk?" I stared at those 3 words for almost an hour. Finally, I replied, "Sure." She came over that afternoon carrying a small bakery box. That was Lauren's way. She always brought something when she didn't know how to start a difficult conversation. "I brought cinnamon rolls," she said. I smiled slightly. "You always bring food when you're uncomfortable." She laughed quietly. "I know." For a moment we were just sisters again, not the responsible one and the one being protected. Just sisters. Then she sat down. "I've been thinking about what happened. I didn't know you paid the venue. I know. Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at her. "Would it have changed anything?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. Lauren looked down at her hands. "I feel terrible." "I believe you." That surprised her. "You do?" "Yes." "Then why does it sound like you're still angry?" "Because I was." But anger wasn't the biggest thing I felt. The biggest thing was exhaustion. "I'm not angry that you needed help, Lauren. I'm angry that everyone assumes I will always be the help." She looked away. "I never asked you to do all those things." "No," I said softly. "You didn't, that was the truth. Nobody ever directly forced me. They simply created a world where saying no felt impossible." A few weeks later, I met someone who helped me understand that. Her name was Rachel Monroe. She worked with another nonprofit in my area and had attended a networking event where I gave a presentation about event planning. Afterward, she approached me. "You're good at seeing problems before they happen." I smiled. "That's usually considered annoying in my family." She laughed. "Then your family doesn't understand project management." It was such a simple comment, but Rachel saw something my family never did. She saw my skill before she saw my usefulness. Over coffee, she told me her organization was preparing for a large fundraising event. "We need someone who can create systems," she explained. "I already have a full-time job. I'm not asking you to quit. I'm asking if you would consult." I almost said no. That was my automatic response. Don't take up space. Don't ask for too much. Don't make things difficult. But something stopped me. Maybe it was Marcus recognizing my work. Maybe it was hearing my mother's words out loud and realizing how unfair they were. Maybe I was simply tired. So I said yes. The project was challenging. The first month was messy. I underestimated how much time it would take. I made mistakes. I missed a few details. One night, I sat in my car outside my apartment, wondering if I had made the wrong decision. Maybe my family was right. Maybe I was only good at fixing things for other people. Maybe I wasn't capable of building something for myself. Then Rachel called. "I looked over your revisions," she said. "Okay. You know what your problem is?" I sighed. "That sounds dangerous." She laughed. "You keep thinking mistakes mean you're not qualified." I didn't answer, because she was right. "You're not valuable because you never fail, Claire. You're valuable because you know what to do after something goes wrong." That sentence stayed with me. Within 4 months, the consulting work became regular. Not a fortune. Not a dramatic life transformation, just something steady, something mine. And then unexpectedly, my mother called. The first thing she said was, "Claire, we need to talk about the house." I sat up. "What house?" "The family house. The one my father had spent 30 years paying for. The one where Lauren and I grew up. The one I assumed would always be a place where I belonged. "I need you to come over," Mom said. Her voice was different, not softer, more careful, and that was when I knew. She wasn't calling because she missed me. She was calling because she needed something. My mother's house looked exactly the same when I arrived. That was the strange thing about family homes. The walls remember everything, even when the people inside them pretend nothing happened. The same blue shutters, the same cracked stone path leading to the front door. The same wooden bench where my father used to sit on summer evenings, drinking iced tea and reading the newspaper. I had a key to that house for 23 years. My father gave it to me when I moved into my first apartment. "Everyone needs somewhere they can return to," he told me. At the time, I thought the key represented trust. Years later, I realized I had been using it to unlock a place where I was only welcome when I was useful. My mother opened the door before I knocked. "Come in." No hug, no apology. Just those 2 words. I stepped inside. Lauren was already sitting at the dining table. That immediately told me this was serious. My sister hated uncomfortable conversations. If she was there, voluntary, something had changed. Mom motioned toward the chair. We need to discuss the house. I sat down. What about it? She folded her hands. The property taxes have increased. Repairs are needed. The roof won't last another winter. I nodded. Okay. She looked surprised. You don't understand. The house needs decisions made. What kind of decisions? My mother exchanged a glance with Lauren. That glance told me more than their words did. The house should stay in the family, Lauren said. I looked at her. What does that mean? Mom took a breath. It means we think it would make sense if you took over more responsibility. There it was. The assignment. Again, I almost laughed. More responsibility? You're good with these things, my mother said. These things? Paperwork, organization, planning. I looked around the dining room, the same room where I had spent years helping everyone else organize their lives. I'm not managing the house. My mother leaned back. Claire, just my name. But I knew the tone, the warning tone. The one that said I was about to disappoint her. I'm not saying no because I don't care, I explained. I'm saying no because I've spent my entire adult life taking responsibility for things that weren't mine. Lauren looked uncomfortable. Claire, Mom isn't asking you to do everything. I turned toward her. Then what is she asking? Nobody answered. That silence was familiar. Because in my family, the person who stayed quiet often controlled the conversation. Finally, my mother said, You've always been the practical one. I smiled sadly. That's another way of saying, I'm the one you expect to sacrifice. Her expression hardened. That's unfair. No, I said. What's unfair is that you call me difficult when I ask questions, but responsible when you need something. The room went quiet. For once, I didn't rush to fill the silence. That was new for me. My mother looked away first. We need someone to help decide what happens with the property. What happened to Dad's plan? That question changed the atmosphere. Because my father had always been clear. The house was supposed to belong equally to both daughters. After his death, my mother had handled everything. Your father isn't here anymore, she said. I know. Things change. That answer bothered me. Not because it was wrong, because it was incomplete. My father had been careful with documents, careful with records, careful with everything. And suddenly, I wondered why my mother was so uncomfortable discussing them. A week later, Rachel noticed something was bothering me. We were reviewing an event budget when she looked up. You're somewhere else today, I sighed. It's my family. She nodded. House? I looked at her. How did you know? Because every time you talk about your family, you sound like someone reviewing a contract where the other person already changed the terms. That was exactly how it felt. I told her about the conversation. She listened carefully. Then she asked one question. Have you seen the paperwork? I frowned. What paperwork? The ownership documents. Estate documents. Anything related to the house? No, why not? I didn't have an answer. And that bothered me, because I was an event coordinator. I noticed missing signatures. I noticed incorrect dates. I noticed when something didn't add up. Yet when it came to my own family, I stopped asking questions. The following Monday, I called the county records office. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. I just wanted clarity. And what I found changed everything. The house wasn't the only thing my mother had been quietly managing. There was a document filed 8 months earlier, a property agreement, and my name was on it, but the signature beside it wasn't mine. I stared at the screen. My heart started beating faster, because suddenly the question was no longer whether my family needed my help. The question was whether they had been using my name without me. I printed the property agreement 3 times. The first copy was because I thought I had misunderstood something. The second was because I thought the website had displayed the wrong document. The third was because I needed to hold the pages in my hands and remind myself that I wasn't imagining what I saw. My name was listed as a co-owner, but the signature attached to the agreement looked nothing like mine. I sat at my kitchen table for almost an hour, the same table where I had answered family calls, the same table where I had organized Lauren's wedding spreadsheets, the same table where I had convinced myself that helping people meant they loved me. Now I was looking at a document that suggested someone had made a decision involving my name without asking me. I called the county office the next morning. The clerk who answered was polite. I can confirm the document was filed on March 12th. Can you tell me who submitted it? Yes, it was submitted by the property owner. My mother? Yes, I swallowed. And was I present when it was signed? There was a pause. I can't provide legal opinions, but the record shows the document was notarized. That word stayed with me. Notarized, official, permanent, a lie with paperwork attached. I didn't call my mother immediately. That surprised me. The old Claire would have rushed over. She would have demanded answers. She would have tried to solve the entire problem before dinner. But something inside me had changed. I had spent my whole life reacting. For once, I wanted to understand before I acted. So I contacted an attorney named Rebecca Sloan. She wasn't a dramatic courtroom lawyer like television shows made them seem. She was practical, calm, the kind of person who read every sentence before speaking. After reviewing the documents, she looked at me. Claire, do you know anything about this agreement? No. Did you authorize anyone to sign on your behalf? No, she tapped the paper. Then we have a serious issue. The word should have scared me. Instead, I felt something else, clarity. For years, my family had made me question myself. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I misunderstood. But facts were different. Facts didn't care who was disappointed. Rebecca explained that we needed additional records and possibly a handwriting review. It wouldn't be fast. It wouldn't be simple. And it wouldn't magically fix everything, but there was a path. That evening, Lauren called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. But I did. Claire? Her voice sounded nervous. What's going on? I didn't respond immediately. How did you know something was going on? Another pause. Mom told me you were asking questions. Of course she did. I found the property agreement. Silence. Then just one word. Not shock, not confusion. Oh, Lauren, did you know about it? I knew Mom wanted to update things. That wasn't my question. She exhaled. I thought it was just paperwork. I closed my eyes. That hurt more than anger would have, because my sister had always benefited from not looking too closely. Lauren, someone signed my name. I didn't know. I believe you. And I did. That was the complicated part. My sister wasn't the person who created every problem, but she was the person who always looked away when problems benefited her. A few days later, my mother called. Her voice was colder than usual. Your sister says you're making this bigger than it needs to be. I stared out my window. Did you sign my name? A long silence followed. Then she said, you're really going to accuse your own mother? Not an answer, I noticed that. I asked a question. You always do this. You look for problems. No, Mom, I look for facts. You know what your problem is, Claire. I almost smiled. Because I knew what was coming. You think everything has to be documented. I looked at the folder on my table. The folder with every email, every receipt, every confirmation, every piece of proof. Yes, I said quietly. I do. She sounded offended. You're choosing paperwork over family, and there it was. The sentence I had heard in different forms my entire life. If I questioned something, I was disloyal. If I protected myself, I was selfish. If I said no, I was the problem. But this time, something inside me didn't collapse. I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I simply said, no, Mom, I'm choosing not to disappear. The line went silent. Then she said something I never expected. After everything we've done for you? I looked around my apartment. The place I paid for myself. The life I built quietly. The career I earned. The stability nobody had given me. And for the first time, I understood. Some people call boundaries selfish because they benefited from having none. I'm not discussing this anymore without the documents being reviewed, I said. Then I ended the call. My hands were shaking, not because I thought I was wrong, because I finally understood I might lose something. Not money, not the house, something more painful. The version of my family I had spent my whole life hoping existed. 3 days later, my mother sent me a message. She wanted to meet. She said she wanted to fix everything. But I had learned something important. Sometimes an apology is not an apology. Sometimes it is just a doorway back into the same room where you were hurt. And I wasn't sure I wanted to walk back in. My mother's message arrived on a Tuesday evening. We need to talk in person. Not through lawyers. Not through paperwork. We're family. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand the words. Because I understood them too well. For most of my life, we're family had been the phrase that pulled me back whenever I tried to protect myself. It had been used when I was expected to cancel plans. When I was asked to solve problems. When I was supposed to forgive without anyone changing. Family had always been presented as something I owed. I sat on my couch holding my phone, thinking about what I wanted to hear. I wanted my mother to say she was sorry, not a careful apology, not a sentence followed by an excuse, a real apology. I was wrong. I hurt you. I should have asked. I should have trusted you. But after 46 years, I knew my mother well enough to understand something. People who avoid responsibility rarely invite you into a conversation because they suddenly discovered honesty. Usually, they want control of the conversation. Still, I agreed to meet. Not because I trusted her. Because I needed to know the truth. We met at a small cafe near her neighborhood, a place she chose because it was quiet. My mother always preferred quiet places for difficult conversations. Not because she wanted privacy, because she didn't like witnesses. She arrived 5 minutes late, something she always criticized other people for doing. She sat across from me and placed her purse beside her chair. For a few moments, she said nothing then. You've become very distant. I looked at her. I stopped answering every emergency. That's not what I mean. I waited. She sighed. I don't understand why you're doing this. Doing what? Making everything about trust. I almost laughed, because trust was exactly the issue. But I stayed quiet. My mother continued. Your father trusted me to handle things after he passed. There it was, my father. The person she knew I couldn't ignore. What did Dad know about the property agreement? Her expression changed, only slightly. But I noticed. That was the difference now. I wasn't trying to convince myself anymore. I was observing. I don't remember every detail. That's interesting. What is that supposed to mean? It means you remember enough details when it benefits you. She looked hurt, real hurt, and that complicated things. Because my mother wasn't a cartoon villain. She wasn't someone who woke up every morning planning to destroy people. She was someone who had spent decades believing that her needs were automatically more important than everyone else's. That didn't excuse her, but understanding someone and excusing them were two different things. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I brought this. I stared at it. What is it? Something your father wrote. My heart changed immediately, because anything connected to my father still mattered to me. I didn't touch it. Why are you giving this to me now? She looked away. I found it recently. I knew she was lying, not because I had proof, because I knew her. The envelope had my name on it, my father's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. My fingers touched the paper, but I didn't open it. Not yet. What do you want from me, Mom? She looked tired. For the first time in a long time, she looked older. I want my daughters back. The sentence almost worked. Almost. Because a younger version of me would have immediately comforted her. I would have reached across the table. I would have told her everything was okay. But the older version of me knew better. You don't just get your daughters back by asking. Her eyes filled slightly. So what do I have to do? That was the first honest question she had asked me in years. I took a breath. You have to stop asking me to prove that I'm loyal and start showing me that you are. She looked down. The waitress came by, and neither of us spoke while she refilled our water glasses. Sometimes silence reveals more than arguments. When I finally opened my father's letter later that night, I found only one page. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't even about my mother. It was about me. He wrote, Claire, the person who carries everything eventually forgets they are allowed to put things down. Never confuse being needed with being loved. They are not the same thing. I read that sentence over and over, because somehow my father had understood the exact lesson I had spent years avoiding. The next morning, Rebecca called. We received additional records from the county. I sat up. What records? There was another filing connected to the property agreement. My stomach tightened. What kind of filing? A witness statement. From who? Rebecca paused, then said, someone who was present when your mother signed the document. I gripped the phone. Who? Her answer changed everything. It was the notary. The person who had supposedly witnessed my signature, the person who could prove whether my name had been used without permission. And suddenly, the confrontation I had spent my whole life avoiding was no longer about being accepted by my family. It was about finally standing beside the truth. The meeting took place 3 weeks later in Rebecca Sloan's office. Not a courtroom, not a dramatic family gathering, not the kind of place where people expected their lives to change. Just a quiet office with gray walls, a wooden table, and a small plant sitting near the window. That felt appropriate. Because the truth rarely arrives with noise. Usually it arrives in ordinary places. My mother sat across from me. Lauren sat beside her. Rebecca sat at the end of the table with a folder in front of her. And beside that folder was the document that had changed everything. The property agreement. The one with my name. The one with a signature I never made. The notary Harold Whitman joined by video call. He was 72 years old and had been a licensed notary for nearly 30 years. He looked uncomfortable, not angry, not defensive. Just like a man who wished he could erase a mistake. Rebecca started calmly. Mr. Whitman, can you confirm that you notarized this agreement on March 12th? Yes. And can you confirm that Claire Whitmore was physically present when this document was signed? He looked down. No. The room became completely silent. My mother shifted in her chair. Rebecca continued. Then why does the document state that she appeared before you? Harold rubbed his forehead. Because I made an error. I looked at him. An error. That phrase was hard to hear. Because mistakes have consequences. Especially when someone else's name is involved. What happened? Rebecca asked. Harold took a breath. Diane came to my office with the paperwork already prepared. She told me Claire had signed it earlier and that she needed my acknowledgement. My mother looked away. Rebecca asked, did you see Claire sign the document? No. Did you verify Claire's identity? No. Did Claire give you permission to sign on her behalf? Every answer felt like another piece of a puzzle finally being placed where it belonged. I looked at my mother. For years, I had wondered if I was being unfair, if I was overreacting, if I was too suspicious. But sitting there listening to the facts, I realized something. I had spent my life questioning my instincts because the people around me benefited from me ignoring them. My mother finally spoke. I was trying to protect the house. Everyone looked at her, she continued. After your father died, I was scared. I thought everything would fall apart. Her voice cracked. And for a second, I saw the woman who raised me, the woman who made dinner every night, the woman who sat beside my bed when I was sick, the woman who also hurt me. Both things were true. I thought if Claire was listed as a co-owner, everything would stay together, she said. Rebecca looked at her. Without telling her? My mother didn't answer. That silence was the answer. Lauren whispered. Mom, my mother looked at her. I was trying to do what was best. That sentence hurt because I had heard it before. People often use what was best when they mean what I decided without asking you. I leaned forward. Mom, I need you to understand something. She looked at me. This was never just about the house. Her eyes lowered. It was about my entire life. Nobody spoke. I spent years believing that being useful was the same as being valued. I thought if I fixed enough problems, nobody would leave me behind. My voice stayed calm. That surprised me. Because months earlier, I would have cried, I would have explained, I would have begged them to understand, but I wasn't asking anymore. I paid Lauren's wedding balance because I thought that was what family did. Lauren closed her eyes. I let people call me difficult because I thought defending myself was selfish. I looked at my mother, but I'm done confusing love with responsibility. My mother wiped her cheek. I never wanted you to feel that way. I believe you. She looked surprised, but wanting something different doesn't erase what happened. That was the hardest thing I had ever said to her. Not because it was cruel, because it was true. Rebecca explained the next steps. The agreement would be corrected. The filing would be challenged. The property would remain divided according to the original legal arrangement. There would be no dramatic punishment, no public humiliation, just consequences. The kind that happen when facts replace assumptions. After the meeting, Lauren followed me outside. Claire, I turned. She looked different, not magically changed, just uncomfortable with seeing herself clearly. I'm sorry. I waited, she continued. I should have asked questions. I should have noticed how much you were doing. I nodded. Yes, you should have. The honesty surprised her. I wasn't angry, but I wasn't rescuing her from guilt either. I want to fix this. I hope you do. Do you think we can? I looked toward the parking lot. I think trust comes back through actions, not promises. She nodded slowly. That was the first time my sister didn't ask me to make her feel better. She simply accepted what I said. Before I left, my mother handed me the old house key, the same key my father gave me years earlier. I should have given this to you differently, she said. I held it in my hand. The metal felt the same. But it meant something different now. It wasn't a symbol that I belonged only when I carried responsibility. It was a reminder that I could choose what doors I opened and what doors I closed. For the first time in my life, my name wasn't attached to a burden. It was attached to my own choices. 6 months after the meeting at Rebecca's office, I returned to my mother's house. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't. I think that is something people often misunderstand about family conflicts. They imagine there is one perfect conversation where everyone cries, apologizes, hugs, and suddenly becomes the people they should have been all along. Real life rarely works that way. Sometimes the most important change is not that someone else becomes different. Sometimes the change is that you finally stop abandoning yourself. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe because I was seeing it differently. The rooms were the same. The photographs on the walls were the same. The old wooden cabinet where my father kept his tools was still in the corner of the garage. But I was different. I no longer walked through that house wondering what needed to be fixed. I walked through it simply as myself. The property agreement was officially corrected 2 months after the meeting. The original ownership arrangement remained. My mother kept her share, I kept mine. There was no dramatic court battle, no newspaper articles, no family scandal, just paperwork being corrected, just the truth being placed where it belonged. And honestly, that was enough. My mother and I started speaking again, slowly, carefully, not like before. Before, every conversation had an invisible expectation attached. She called because she needed something. I answered because I felt guilty. That cycle was over. Now when she called, I listened. But I also paid attention to how I felt afterward. That was something I had never done before. I used to measure relationships by how much I could give. Now I measured them by whether there was respect. Lauren changed too, not overnight, not perfectly, but genuinely. She started asking questions, real questions, not questions where she already expected me to solve the problem. When she planned another business event, she hired a professional consultant instead of assuming I would handle it. The first time she told me that, I actually laughed. You hired someone else? She smiled. I thought I should learn how normal people do things. I laughed harder than I expected. Because for the first time in years, we could joke about the pattern instead of living inside it. She also paid me back for the wedding money. Not immediately. Not with one dramatic gesture. She created a payment plan and followed it every month. That mattered more than the money. Because accountability is not a sentence. It is a habit. Rachel continued encouraging me to expand my consulting work. A year later, I reduced my hours at my nonprofit job and started taking on larger event projects. Not because I needed to prove anything. Not because I wanted my family to finally notice. Because I enjoyed it. That was the difference. For the first time, I was building something because I wanted it. Not because someone needed me. One afternoon, I was organizing files in my office when I found the folder from Lauren's wedding. The one that had started everything. Inside were vendor lists, payment records, timelines, notes, and the original welcome envelope. I held it for a while. A year earlier, that envelope represented everything I felt I had lost. Now it represented something else. Evidence. Not of my family's failure, of my own strength. I had spent years believing my value came from how much weight I could carry, but my father was right. The person who carries everything eventually forgets they are allowed to put things down. I finally understood that. Being dependable is a beautiful quality. But being dependable does not mean being available for disrespect. Being generous does not mean allowing people to take from you. And loving your family does not require losing yourself. My mother still has difficult moments. Sometimes she still says things that remind me of the past. The difference is that I no longer shrink when it happens. One afternoon, she made a comment about me being too independent. The old Claire would have apologized. The new Claire simply smiled. I worked hard to become someone I could depend on. She didn't argue. She just nodded. And that was enough. Because peace doesn't always come from getting the apology you wanted. Sometimes it comes from no longer needing that apology to know the truth. I still have the old key to my father's house. It sits in a small wooden box on my desk, not because I need it, because I choose to keep it. It reminds me of the woman I was, the woman who thought love had to be earned, the woman who believed being needed was the same as being valued. And it reminds me of the woman I became, the woman who learned that she could love people and still have boundaries, the woman who finally understood that she was never the family burden. She was the person who carried a family that had forgotten how heavy it was. And when she finally put it down, she discovered something sustaining. She could still stand. If this story reminded you of a moment when you had to choose yourself, share your thoughts below. And stay connected with Calm Story House for more stories about courage, truth, and the quiet strength people find when they stop accepting less than they deserve.